It was a cold January morning in 1848, and the Sierra Nevada mountains were silent except for the sound of rushing water. A carpenter named James Marshall was inspecting a sawmill he had been building for a Swiss entrepreneur named John Sutter along the American River in Coloma, California. The mill was nearly finished. The work was almost done. And then he saw it. Something glittered at the bottom of the water channel. Something small, heavy, and unmistakably yellow. Marshall picked it up. He bit it. He hammered it. He tested it every way he knew how. And when he rode to Sutter's Fort that same day, his hands trembling, his voice barely above a whisper, he told John Sutter what he had found. Gold. Real gold. They both tried to keep it a secret. They failed. Within weeks, word had spread across California. Within months, it had crossed the continent. And by the time President James K. Polk stood before Congress in December of 1848 and confirmed the discovery to the entire nation, there was no stopping what was coming. Newspapers across America ran headlines that seemed impossible. Gold, gold, gold from the American River, screamed the front page of the San Francisco Californian. Men who had never dreamed of leaving their hometowns suddenly couldn't think of anything else. Farmers in Ohio, clerks in Boston, sailors in New York, young men with nothing to lose, and older men with everything at stake. They called themselves the 49ers because 1849 was the year they came. And they came by the hundreds of thousands. Those who lived on the East Coast faced an impossible choice of how to get there. Some chose to sail around Cape Horn, the southern tip of South America, a journey of more than 18,000 miles that could take 5 to 8 months through some of the most violent seas on Earth. Ships that left New York in January sometimes didn't arrive in San Francisco until August. Passengers endured storms so fierce that grown men wept openly on the decks. Food rotted, water turned foul, disease spread below deck like a quiet fire. Others chose the Overland Trail, 6 months of walking across prairies, deserts, and mountain ranges that had no mercy for the unprepared. The trail was littered with the graves of those who hadn't made it, broken wagons, dead oxen, personal belongings abandoned on the side of the road to lighten the load, Bibles, rocking chairs, wedding portraits left in the dirt. And there was a third route through the jungles of Panama. Faster, yes, but the jungle carried cholera, yellow fever, and malaria. Many men who chose this path arrived in California already dying. But still, they came. By the end of 1849, the population of California had exploded from roughly 14,000 non-native people to nearly 100,000. San Francisco, which had been a quiet village of just a few hundred residents just 2 years before, was now a roaring, chaotic, unrecognizable city of tents and wooden shacks packed with men from every corner of the world. They had come from Chile, from China, from Mexico, from Australia, from France, from Ireland. They had come speaking different languages, carrying different dreams, wearing different faces, but they all wanted the same thing. They all wanted gold. What most of them didn't know, what none of them could have imagined, was what was truly waiting for them when they arrived.
Imagine waking up before the sun rises, inside a canvas tent so thin that the cold passes through it like it isn't there. The ground beneath you is wet. Your boots, left outside, are stiff with frost. Your back aches from sleeping on the earth. Your hands are already cracked and bleeding before the day has even begun. This was the morning of a 49er. The mining camps that spread along the rivers and hills of the Sierra Nevada were nothing like the places these men had left behind. There were no churches, no schools, no hospitals, no women, at least not in the early years. There were no paved streets, no running water, no sanitation. There was only work, mud, exhaustion, and the relentless hope that today, maybe today, would be the day. The most common form of early mining was called placer mining. It required nothing more than a metal pan, a strong back, and infinite patience. A miner would crouch at the edge of a river, scoop gravel and sediment into his pan, and swirl it slowly, allowing the water to carry away the lighter material, while the heavier gold, if there was any, settled at the bottom. It sounds simple. It was anything but. A miner might work 8 to 12 hours a day, bent over freezing mountain water, and find nothing. Not a flake, not a grain, just rock and cold and disappointment. His knees would ache from crouching, His fingers would go numb and then burn as the feeling returned. His back would tighten into a constant grinding pain that followed him even into sleep. And for this suffering, the average miner in 1849 earned roughly the same as a common laborer back home, if he was lucky. But the cruelest joke of the gold rush wasn't the physical punishment. It was the economy that had grown up around it. The merchants understood something the miners did not. The real gold wasn't in the rivers, it was in the miners' pockets. A simple pickaxe that cost $1 in the eastern United States could cost $50 in the mining camps. A single egg, one egg, sold for as much as $1 at a time when a skilled worker back east earned perhaps $1 a day. Flour, bacon, coffee, blankets, everything was marked up to prices that would seem outrageous today, let alone in 1849. A miner who struck a decent find on Monday could easily find himself broke by Friday after buying a week's worth of supplies. The camps themselves were cesspools of disease. Cholera was the great killer, spreading through contaminated water sources that no one thought to protect. Dysentery, typhoid, and scurvy, the ancient disease of sailors caused by a lack of vitamin C, tore through the population with terrifying efficiency. Men who had left home in perfect health could be dead within weeks of arriving. There were no doctors in most camps, or if there were, they were often no better trained than the miners themselves. The loneliness was something the history books rarely mention, but the letters these men left behind make it impossible to ignore. A miner named John Eagle wrote to his wife in Pennsylvania in 1850, "I think of you every waking hour and many sleeping ones. I have not spoken to a woman in 4 months. The silence here after dark is not peaceful, it is hollow." Another miner wrote simply, "I would give every grain of gold I have found to sit at your table again." And yet, they stayed, because to go home empty-handed felt like a kind of death too. A death of pride, a death of the dream that had brought them so far from everything they loved. They stayed, and they dug, and they hoped. And the river kept flowing, indifferent and cold, carrying its secrets deeper into the dark.
Before we continue, I want to stop for just a moment and ask you something. You've seen the dream that brought these men here, and now you've seen the brutal reality that was waiting for them. The freezing rivers, the disease, the loneliness, the merchants getting rich while the miners suffered. So tell me, in the comments right now, if you had been alive in 1849, would you have made the journey? Would the dream of gold have been enough? I read every single comment, and I want to know what you think. Because what comes next, the violence, the lawlessness, and the stories that history tried to bury, is something you are not going to want to miss. There is a town in the California foothills that was once known as Hangtown. It wasn't called that by accident. In the early days of the gold rush, California was not yet a state. It had no functioning government, no courts, no sheriffs, no jails. The military presence was thin and largely ineffective. And into that vacuum, that vast, lawless emptiness, rushed 300,000 men carrying picks, shovels, and desperate ambitions. What happened next should not surprise anyone who understands human nature under pressure. Violence became currency. The mining camps operated under their own brutal logic. Disputes over claims, who had the right to mine which stretch of river, were settled not by judges, but by fists, knives, and guns. A man could spend weeks working a patch of land, building a small shelter, establishing his presence, and wake up one morning to find another man standing in his spot, daring him to do something about it. Many did something about it. Many died because of it. Theft was rampant. Gold, once found, had to be hidden, guarded, and defended. Men slept with their findings tucked inside their clothes. Partnerships formed not out of friendship, but out of necessity, because a man alone was a vulnerable man. And even partnerships turned deadly when one partner decided that splitting the gold was less appealing than taking all of it. The vigilante justice that emerged was swift, merciless, and often terrifyingly wrong. In Placerville, the town that earned the name Hangtown, a mob of miners once hanged 3 men in a single afternoon based on little more than suspicion and accusation. No trial, no evidence, no appeal, just a rope and a crowd that had already decided the outcome. This was not an isolated incident. Across the mining regions, men were flogged, branded, mutilated, and killed by crowds who had appointed themselves judge, jury, and executioner. The absence of law did not create freedom, it created fear. And for certain groups, that fear was not random.
it was systematic. The racism that defined American society in the 1840s did not disappear when men crossed the Sierra Nevada. It intensified. Chilean and Mexican miners, many of whom had been working California's lands long before the American 49ers arrived, were targeted, robbed, and driven from their claims with brutal regularity. In 1850, the California state legislature passed what became known as the Foreign Miners Tax, a monthly fee designed specifically to push non-American miners out of the gold fields. It was enforcement by law of what had already been happening by force. Chinese miners, who began arriving in significant numbers by 1850 and 1851, faced perhaps the most sustained and organized hostility. They were barred from the richest claims, forced to work the leftovers that others had abandoned, taxed at rates that made profit nearly impossible, and subjected to violence that rarely resulted in any legal consequence for the perpetrators. The Chinese community called California Gansan, Gold Mountain. What they found was something far colder. And the Native Americans, the people who had lived on this land for thousands of years before a single flake of gold was ever pulled from its rivers, suffered consequences that can only be described as catastrophic. The gold rush brought settlers into territories that had previously seen limited contact with American expansion. Within just a few years, violence, disease, displacement, and outright massacres had decimated California's indigenous population. Historians estimate that the Native American population of California fell from roughly 150,000 in 1845 to fewer than 30,000 by 1870. It was one of the darkest chapters in a history already filled with dark chapters. The gold rush did not just reshape the land of California, it revealed the character of a nation, its greed, its courage, its cruelty, and its contradictions, all at once, compressed into a few extraordinary years along the banks of rivers that had once been quiet. The dream of gold had built something, but it had also destroyed something, and the people who paid that price most dearly were the ones who had never wanted to be part of the dream in the first place. And now, before we go any further, I need to stop and speak directly to you. You have stayed with this story through the dream, through the suffering, through the darkness and the violence, and that means something. Most people would have moved on by now, but you are still here. Thank you. Genuinely, thank you. Because what is coming in the next two chapters, the truth about who actually got rich, and the permanent scar that the gold rush left on the soul of America, is the part of this story that almost nobody talks about. It is the part that will stay with you long after this video ends. The best is absolutely still to come. Don't go anywhere.
Here is the truth that the legend of the gold rush has always tried to hide. The vast majority of the men who came to California in 1849 never found significant gold. Not enough to justify the journey. Not enough to repay the debts they had taken on to get there. Not enough to replace the years they had lost, the families they had left behind, the health they had sacrificed to rivers and diseases and brutal mountain winters. Historians estimate that by 1852, the average daily earnings of a miner had fallen to roughly $6, and that was before expenses. After paying for food, tools, shelter, and the endless costs of camp life, many miners were operating at a loss. Men who had arrived dreaming of mansions went home to debts they spent the rest of their lives paying off. Some didn't go home at all. They are buried in unmarked graves along rivers whose names most Americans today have never heard. But someone got rich. Someone always gets rich. His name was Sam Brannan, and he is one of the most fascinating and infuriating figures in American history. Brannan was a merchant, a newspaper publisher, and an extraordinarily shrewd businessman who had arrived in California before the gold rush even began. When word of Marshall's discovery reached him, Brannan did not grab a pan and run to the river. Instead, he did something far more calculating. He went to Sutter's Fort and quietly bought up every pickaxe, every shovel, every pan, and every mining supply he could find. He stocked his store to the ceiling, and then, only then, he walked through the streets of San Francisco waving a bottle of gold dust above his head, shouting at the top of his lungs that gold had been discovered at Sutter's Mill. He manufactured the frenzy, and then he sold to everyone caught up in it. Within a matter of months, Sam Brannan had become California's first millionaire. He had never once dug in the dirt. He had never once stood knee-deep in a freezing river. He had simply understood something that the dreamers had not, that in a gold rush, the men who sell the shovels grow richer than the men who use them. He was not alone in this understanding. Levi Strauss, a young Bavarian immigrant, came to California not to mine, but to sell dry goods. He ended up making durable work pants for miners out of a tough canvas fabric.
Those pants evolved into what the world now knows as blue jeans. Levi Strauss & Company still exists today. Philip Armour, who would go on to build one of the largest meatpacking empires in American history, got his start in California providing food to hungry miners. The gold rush made merchants into legends and miners into cautionary tales. And then there was John Sutter himself, the man on whose land the gold had first been discovered. You might expect that his story ends in prosperity. It does not. The flood of miners that poured onto his land destroyed everything he had built. His crops were trampled, his workers abandoned him to go mining, his cattle were stolen, his sawmill was overrun. By 1852, John Sutter was financially ruined, the great irony of a man who had owned the land where it all began and had been left with nothing because of it. He spent the last decades of his life petitioning the United States government for compensation that never came. He died in 1880, broke and largely forgotten. The gold rush had a particular cruelty to it. It gave some men everything they ever wanted. It took from other men everything they ever had. And for most, the hundreds of thousands who came with hope and left with empty hands, it offered something perhaps more painful than failure. It offered just enough hope to keep them digging one more day.
By 1855, the gold rush was effectively over. The surface gold, the flakes and nuggets that could be pulled from rivers with nothing more than a pan and determination, had been largely exhausted. What remained required heavy industrial machinery, corporate investment, and a scale of operation that no individual miner could manage alone. The age of the lone prospector was finished. The age of industrial mining had begun. The men who had come to California began to scatter. Some went home. Some went looking for the next rush, to Nevada, to Colorado, to Australia, following the eternal rumor that somewhere, just over the next mountain, the real fortune was waiting. Some simply stayed because they had nowhere else to go and built lives in the state that their arrival had transformed beyond recognition. And transformed it they had. In 1848, California was a territory with a scattered population and no formal American governance. By September of 1850, less than 2 years after Marshall's discovery, it was the 31st state of the United States, pushed through Congress at breathtaking speed by the sheer weight of its suddenly enormous population. San Francisco had become a genuine city, not a city of tents and mud, but a city of brick buildings, banks, newspapers, theaters, restaurants, and churches. Its population had grown from perhaps 800 people in 1848 to over 36,000 by 1852. It would become one of the great cities of the American West, shaped from its very foundation by the chaos and commerce of the gold rush years. The banking and financial systems that emerged from the gold rush, the mechanisms for storing, transferring, and investing gold, laid important groundwork for the broader American economy. Wells Fargo, founded in 1852 to serve the booming California market, is still one of the largest banks in the United States today. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, was partly driven by the need to connect California to the rest of the nation, a need made urgent by the gold rush. The railroad in turn accelerated the settlement of the entire American West, with all the consequences, both magnificent and devastating, that followed from it. But the legacy of the gold rush is not only a story of buildings and banks and railroads. The native peoples of California never recovered. The violence and dispossession of the gold rush years initiated a demographic collapse from which the indigenous population would not begin to recover for over a century. Languages were lost, cultures were shattered, entire communities ceased to exist. This part of the gold rush legacy is not a footnote. It is a central chapter that demands to be told honestly. The Chinese immigrants who endured discrimination and violence during the gold rush stayed in California and built communities that persisted through generations of legal hostility. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, the most explicitly racist immigration law in American history, was in many ways the long shadow of the anti-Chinese sentiment that had been normalized during the gold rush years. The environment of California bore wounds that are still visible today. Hydraulic mining, a later technique that used powerful jets of water to blast entire hillsides apart in search of gold, deposited enormous quantities of debris into rivers and valleys, altering the landscape permanently, destroying farmland and devastating salmon populations that indigenous and local communities had depended on for centuries. And yet, and this is perhaps the most complicated truth of all, the gold rush also embedded something deep into the American identity that has never fully faded. The idea that a person of ordinary birth, with nothing but determination and willingness to risk everything, could arrive somewhere new and change their life completely,
That idea, however cruel its reality often proved to be, became a foundational part of how Americans understand themselves and their country. The 49ers were not heroes. They were not villains. They were human beings, flawed, desperate, brave, selfish, and sometimes surprisingly tender, caught up in a moment so large and so fast that none of them could fully comprehend what they were part of. They came for gold. What they built and what they destroyed was something far more lasting.